I'm back with part 2 of my reaction to Complex's top 50 New York rappers list. Part 1 had some controversial picks, some great discussion points, and you can bet that part 2 will have much of the same. I'm Ryan, I talk music, here we go again. A couple of reminders from part 1. First of all, I'm a little bit late to this list as this did come out in the summer of 2023 in honor of the 50th anniversary of hip-hop. I wasn't a YouTuber back then, so I'm kind of catching up on lists like this. And second, I haven't fully digested this list yet. I basically saw this for the first time as I was putting together the script for this video. So while I do know what the top 25 looks like when I was writing the script, that was an initial reaction. So while this isn't quite the first time I've seen it, it's kind of similar. And I'm really articulating how I feel for the first time. Alright, no more bullshit. Let's get into the top 25. I knew we were going to see Cardi B on this list, and I knew she would be ranked way too high. Off influence alone, she does deserve a spot in the top 50, but I would say nothing higher than 40 or 45, 47, 48. She's kind of a trash rapper, but while I do appreciate her philanthropy, her business acumen, her social views, that doesn't save her from not being very good on the mic. 25, it's a bit egregious even if she's influential and successful. This is another one of those influence picks that I talked about so much in part 1. And let's also, if we're talking about best rappers, let me remind you that there were a ton of spitters relegated to the bottom 25 of this list. Kool G Rap, Big L, Pharoah Monch, GZA, Sean Price, MC Lyte, and Complex wants to put Cardi B at 25. But let's be honest, that's not accurate. Unless you like watered down pop rap, number 25 is a garbage pick. I'm gonna take a breath here. 24 is a pick that I appreciate a bit more. It's QTip. I always liked his laid back voice, his delivery, his ability, not just as a rapper, but as a musician. But again, this list is just for best rappers. But that is part of QTip's legacy, being a producer, being kind of an executive behind the scenes type of guy. I've never had QTip as one of these great technical MCs. He's definitely an above average rapper. He's got a great iconic voice. He's been very solid across his entire career as a rapper, coming out with A Tribe Called Quest, building his fame there, and then getting on to having a solo career that's really been existent since the breakup of A Tribe Called Quest, even though Tribe did come back briefly in the mid-2010s. So while he's not the best rapper ever, he's extremely influential. Part of this is an influence pick. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. In the case of QTip, it works. 24 is good. Reverend Run from Run-DMC at number 23. Not a bad pick also. I definitely include him in the top 25, so I agree with this. Again, he's less of a technical rapper. He's more of an influence type pick. He was a trailblazer, and he ushered in what would become kind of the new style in hip-hop in the early to mid-80s. Run-DMC's breakout was one of the biggest things in hip-hop history to this day, and even though some of the rapping kind of sounded like nursery rhymes, it was pretty elementary compared to what would come later in the 80s in the golden age. Run and Run-DMC set the stage for that. He had more hardcore lyrics. There was a bit of a different rapping style, though it was, again, still pretty basic, but he's a stalwart of the early culture. His voice is synonymous with mid-school hip-hop, mid-80s hip-hop, and while he's not necessarily a true pioneer, he's an originator of how hip-hop would go on to sound. And for that, he deserves recognition and belongs in the top 25. Good pick. Chuck D, perhaps the most politically and socially driven MC of all time, comes in at number 22. I think that's a little bit too low. He's one of the most revolutionary voices subject matter-wise in hip-hop history. He's in my top 15 out of New York. He may not be one of the most technical MCs, but he really pushed lyrical boundaries more than most, if not anybody in the game. He blazed trails for so many socially conscious MCs, not just in New York, not just in the United States, but internationally. He started a movement. He's had a proud career both as part of Public Enemy and outside of Public Enemy as a solo artist, a member of the supergroup Prophets of Rage. And 22, it's a respectable placement, but I definitely think he should be a little bit higher. This isn't nearly as egregious as some of the other picks I've seen on this list, but Chuck D deserves about an extra 10 spots. 22, too low. At number 21, we have Method Man from Wu-Tang Clan. I'm not at all mad at this pick. I'm a little bit peeved at the fact that Meth gets included over GZA. I think GZA was one of the biggest oversights in the first half of this list. He was all the way back at number 33. I think GZA is the best rapper from Wu-Tang Clan, and while Method Man definitely deserves a spot on this list, I can't help but think about GZA. So I can't really focus on any other Wu-Tang related pick without being a little bit biased, but let's focus on Method Man for right now. That's who we're talking about. From the start of his career, he was one of the top MCs, the top voices in Wu-Tang Clan. He was the first Wu-Tang artist to have a solo album. He's always been one of the leading MCs of the collective. He's had a very solid solo solo career. He had a great run with Redman in the late 90s, early 2000s. He absolutely deserves a spot in the top 25. He's had a remarkable 30 plus years in the game. I love this pick, but I can't help but be a little bit sour about JayZ. All right, enough. I'm done. Slick Rick at number 20. That's good placement, I think. There are many that would make a strong argument for Slick Rick to be a lot higher than 20. I'd put him in my top 15. Many of you might put him in your top 10. Regardless of where he's placed, he's one of hip-hop's best storytellers. He's one of the stalwarts of the golden age. His smooth voice and delivery made his storytelling accessible and relatable in a way. And while the discography angle isn't quite as strong as a lot of these rappers so high up on this list, I definitely appreciate this pick. Slick Rick is an all-time great, and if you're going to rank any MC inside the top 20, you better make sure they're an all-time great. In the case of Slick Rick, it works. When we talk about undisputed all-time greats, we have to talk about Big Daddy Kane. He's number 19 on this list. Again, I think this is good placement. Again, I'd probably place him a little bit higher. He probably actually makes my top 10. I think other than Rakim, now if Rakim is not included in the top 10 on this list, I'll quit my work as a YouTuber and I'll go be a missionary in the South Pacific. Other than Rakim, I think Big Daddy Kane is the most talented rapper from the golden age. He had such a smooth voice, he had just enough accessibility to remain relevant, and I think he was one of the top 3 wordsmiths of his day. Again, his only competition was Rakim and maybe Kool G Rap, maybe KRS-One. That's not to mention the fact that he had a very solid first 2 albums, and he had some stronger albums in the 90s as well. He built himself a legendary status that led to many more opportunities in his career as time went on, but I'm okay with him at number 19 unless we see names like Nicki Minaj or Tekashi 6ix9ine higher up. At number 18, we have Yasin B, better known as Mos Def. Good pick. I think he's one of the most socially conscious rappers in hip-hop history. He's been on some weirdo shit in recent years, but that doesn't take away from his legacy. He did some incredible work when he came out both as a solo artist and as a member of Black Star with Talib Kweli. He had some solo albums during the 2000s, during some of the weaker years for East Coast hip-hop, and he managed to transcend the era he came up in by maintaining his artistic integrity. In the last decade plus, he's branched out into more of an acting career and has focused a little bit less on music, though you still see him popping up with some really good guest appearances here and there. I think mostly of the appearance on Freddie Gibbs and Madlib's Bandana in 2019 on the song Education. Black Star did drop an album in 2022, but that was stupidly locked by some obscure streaming service. The rollout for that album was garbage. Regardless of what he's done in recent years, he's one of the most important and influential underground New York rappers of all time. He actually towed the line between mainstream and underground, but again, he kept his integrity. He never blew up or went pop. He very well could have. He was talented enough to do so. He kind of had that same angle that QTip had. He's absolutely in my top 20 New York rappers of all time. Complex nailed this pick. Now Cameron at number 17, that's a stretch. I love Killah Cam. I love his flow. I love his diction. I love how he can make the stupidest rhymes sound absolutely awesome. He's one of the smoothest, most charismatic, most unapologetically confident rappers of all time. He's got a ton of skill, but number 17 over greats like Big Daddy Kane, JayZ, Kool G Rap, etc., etc. Nah, I don't agree with that. Cam is in my top 30 at best, and while he had some excellent work during a time where New York was basically going soft in the early 2000s, I can't give him a top 20 endorsement. I just can't do that. I'll say he's the most talented out of Dipset. I do think influentially he's one of the top 20 guys in New York hip-hop, but again, this is less about influence and more about technicality as a rapper. I guess there's definitely an influence piece to this, as I've said, but I think the first criteria here should be how good of a rapper are you? And that's where I think I disagree with this pick and a number of picks on Complex's list. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. I think Cameron deserves a ton of recognition. I think he deserves a spot in maybe the bottom 25 of this list, but number 17, that's a no for me. That said, I've always been a Cameron fan, and I can understand why somebody might put him in their top 20. He just doesn't belong in mine. Jadakiss at number 16, that's a much better pick. I agree with this one. He's one of the slickest rappers with one of the hardest voices in the game. He's had an incredible career. He came out with the Lox in the mid-90s on the Evil Bad Boy records. The Lox eventually broke away from Bad Boy. Jadakiss went solo. He carved his own legacy. I do think that Kiss is one of those artists that as many legendary guest appearances and moments as he's had in hip-hop history, his discography isn't quite there. His albums are kind of bloated. They're painfully mid at times, but he's got some big hits. We Gon' Make It is an excellent song, one of the biggest songs of my adolescent years, but he's also known for his legendary guest appearances, his ultra witty bars, his staying power in hip-hop, hip-hop. He's found a way to maintain his relevance. And pound for pound, he's one of the most talented rappers to ever come out of New York. Now, he's out of New York, but he's out of Yonkers, which is one of the suburbs. Technically, as a rapper, skill-wise, I think he might even be in the top 10. I'd make a case for that. But I do think we have to factor in discography. And of course, since we've done it for every other rapper on this list, we have to factor in influence. Influence, I think, puts him in the top 15, top 20, but discography definitely holds him back just a little. I don't care as much that Kiss doesn't have a classic album. I've always loved him, and I always will. Big Pun is one of the most talented rappers to ever represent New York, and he comes in here at number 15 on Complex's list. I'm not mad at this pick at all. I do think a lot of people put him in their top 10, and I wonder if they would do that if there wasn't that posthumous appeal. But I also wouldn't rank him outside my top 20 for New York. In fact, I think 15 is a perfect spot. On the mic, he was one of the first rappers to put words together in a way that just sounded incredible. There's so many rappers that do that these days. I think of guys like Eminem and what he's become, and he just spits a bunch of gibberish and garbage, as do many of these other fast, technical rappers. I think of the Hobsons. I think of even Tech Nine, who I used to be a fan of. Pun actually managed to do this well. His subject matter was always on point. There was a lot of bragging and boasting and jewels and mafioso life, but I don't know. He made it work. Pun kind of originated this whole spitting to sound cool, for better or for worse. But again, he made it meaningful. He made it interesting. He was a trailblazer. His influence is broad. He's probably the most talented Latino rapper of all time. If I were from the Bronx, I would be very proud to have Big Pun as an asset coming from my borough. I think Complex pretty much nailed this pick too. Couple of banger picks here as we get inside the top 20. MF Doom at number 14. Again, I agree with that. That's actually a very good placement for Doom. I think Doom, again, just like Big Pun, a lot of posthumous appeal. I think if he were still alive, there'd be less people putting him in their top 5, their top 10. I think he belongs in the top 15, but not in the top 10. I think people glaze Doom a little bit, as great as he is or was. I will say that when they announced his death on New Year's Eve in 2020, it hit me pretty deeply. There have been a lot of rappers that have passed away that have affected me. Doom was up there. Dating all the way back to his days as Zev Love X as part of the group KMD, Doom has always been on point as a lyricist. He's always been very special with his wordplay, his use of metaphors, double entendres, deep nerdy references, all delivered in his iconic gruff voice. It really set him aside from other lyricists. I do think a lot of Doom fans are a little bit on the nerdy side. I'm on the nerdy side too. But look, you can't deny his solo output between 1999's Operation Doomsday and 2004's Food was second to none. One of the best runs in hip-hop history that includes Mad Villainy. Food came out after Mad Villainy. While he was a great rapper, he was also a very talented producer and made a lot of his own beats. But this is about the art of rapping. This is about influence as a rapper. I do think he deserves this spot at number 14. I don't think he deserves to be any higher. I think there's too many other influential names. Don't be one of those people that elevates Doom to the top 5 just because he's dead. He's not a top 5 New York rapper, but he's very good. If he's in your top 5, that's fine. I appreciate and understand that. But just be careful about that posthumous appeal. Ghostface Killah at number 13. I'm glad to see this one as well. I'd probably put Ghost in my top 10, but 13 is fine. Ghostface is a special rapper. He has this aggressive stream of consciousness delivery that I love. He's loud. He's in your face. His use of cryptic slang is second only to bandmate Raekwon from Wu-Tang Clan. His subject material is often delivered in a very unique, cryptic, abstract way that somehow comes off as relatably imperfect. He's got the strongest discography of any Wu-Tang solo member by far, and he's the most consistent and accomplished rapper out of the group over the group's 30-year history. His albums are great. His guest appearances are great. He had a great album in Iron Man in 1996, Supreme Clientele in 2000, Fish Scale in 2006, but his technicality as a rapper truly stands up to this number 13 spot here. Again, I'd include him about 5 spots higher, but I'm okay with 13. Good pick. We had a string of banger picks there, but now it's time to get into some that I don't agree with. Lil' Kim at number 12, I don't think that's right. She's in my top 50 out of New York for sure. Let's just be clear. She had a ton of influence. She has a great voice. But number 12 is kind of actually a joke. This is, again, an influence-weighted pick. Like Foxy Brown, she had a ton of influence on other female rappers of future generations, the Nicki Minaj's, the Cardi B's. But technically, she's no better than Foxy Brown. I would make a case that Foxy Brown's actually a better rapper than Lil' Kim. Maybe her association with the evil Bad Boy records and the fact that she had more hits helps her achieve this placement. I don't know. This is an influence-driven pick, and while she's definitely no slouch on the mic, she's like a slightly above average rapper at best. I do appreciate her delivery, which can come off as a menacing snarl. She's had some legendary guest appearances. I think of Mobb Deep's Quiet Storm remix in 1999. That's really the verse that turned me on to Lil' Kim's greatness. But number 12, the 12th best rapper to come out of New York City, hip-hop's birthplace? No. Alright, I was getting nervous about this next one. I thought they were going to snub Prodigy. If you know me, and if you pay attention to this channel, you'll know that Mobb Deep is my favorite hip-hop act of all time. Their 1995 masterpiece, The Infamous, is my favorite album of all time, regardless of genre. Their follow-up to that album, 1996's Hell on Earth, is in my top 10 of all time, regardless of genre. And a big reason for this is because Prodigy was untouchable on those albums. I had mentioned before about how I was affected by like MF Doom's death, and in part 1 I talked about the death of Sean Price. Prodigy was about as bad as it got for me. His stark, unapologetic, and straightforward crime raps got me through, in an unlikely way, some serious anxiety and mental health issues that I was dealing with as I was growing up. And the stark darkness of Prodigy's demeanor, and also Havoc's beats and his rhymes as well, really gave me sort of this unlikely outlet. So when he passed in 2017, I was pretty gutted. He was a fantastic storyteller. His run between the years of 1995 and 2000 is almost unmatched. I think it's one of the best 5-year periods for any rapper ever. And I just mentioned that 5-year period for MF Doom. I think Prodigy, while it was less solo stuff, while it was more Mobb Deep work, I think his 95 to 2000 run matches up to Doom's 99 to 04 run. He was on a tear during that time as one of the most ominous, menacing rappers. He was not to be f***ed with. Some of his grisly, descriptive writing and his intricate, cryptic rhyme skills at times, they still drop my jaw to this day when I listen to them. After the turn of this century, after a very good solo album in HNIC in 2000, he kind of fell off a little bit. He got a little bit lazy on the mic on those early 2000s Mobb Deep albums. As much nostalgia as the album Infamy has for me, Prodigy's flows on there, it sounds like he was mailing it in. He did refocus on his solo career in the last 10 years of his life. He actually had some great solo albums during that time. He's one of the most dark and yet thoughtful lyricists of all time. He's not for the faint of heart. I'm glad to see him at number 11. He makes my top 10 for sure. And while he's had consistency issues across his career, there are few rappers whose artistry has meant as much to me as Prodigy's has. Hey now, we're into the top 10, and what better way to start it than with KRS-One? I think that's perfect placement, again, by Complex. This is another really surprisingly good placement in this section of the list. There have been some questionable picks. There will be more to come, but KRS-One at number 10, once again, they nailed it. KRS has had a legendary career. He's always been one of the representatives of the core values of hip-hop. This dates all the way back to his time coming out in the mid to late 80s as part of Boogie Down Productions. He went on to have an excellent solo career after he disbanded Boogie Down Productions in the early 90s. His 90s albums are fantastic. Return of the Boom Bap is a masterpiece. He's always been thoughtful, introspective, aggressive, energetic, and commanding on the mic all at the same time. He preaches knowledge of self, Afrocentricity, highlights social and political issues, and he values the true core elements of hip-hop more than any rapper that I've ever heard. I was lucky enough to see a KRS-One show in the summer of 2024, and he had all the elements of hip-hop on stage. Rapping, DJing, graffiti, beatboxing. All of it was going on, and he made sure those 4 core elements of hip-hop were being represented. I'll never forget that. I thought that was really, really cool. He's a poet, he's a teacher, he's a pillar in the hip-hop community. He's squarely in my top 10 rappers out of New York, and I'm glad that Complex agrees. Busta Rhymes at number 9. Interesting. I would not rank Busta in my top 10. I would put him more in my top 20, top 25, but you could make a case for him here. He's another rapper that's had a great decades-long career since coming out as part of the leaders of the New School, as part of the Native Tongues movement in the late 80s, early 90s. He embarked on a robust solo career starting in the second half of the 90s with 2 great albums to kick that solo career off. He had a mainstream breakout in the late 90s, early 2000s, and the quality definitely did decline, but he still maintained a pretty good deal of artistic integrity. He's got one of the most dizzying, in-your-face deliveries in the game. I think he's also one of those rappers like Eminem that kind of raps just to sound cool. If you hear his newer stuff today, it's really not very good. But look, his energy is unmatched, and even while the subject matter at times isn't exactly superb, he has long been an icon in New York hip-hop, and he's one of the most unique voices. His charisma, his energy, even his stage presence is just excellent. He's got one of the most recognizable, wild, and unrefined deliveries in hip-hop. He certainly belongs in the top half of this list. Top 25, I would probably slide him into my top 20, but number 9, I unfortunately think that's a little bit of a stretch. DMX, number 8. I hate to say it, but I think that this pick is driven more by DMX's posthumous appeal. X is another guy that's here in Complex's top 10, and it's probably on the fringe of my top 20. He deserves placement on the top half or whatever bottom half of this list, but since his death in 2021, his stock has gone way, way up. I've seen so many people give him his flowers after he was gone, and I just see so much of that, man. We gotta appreciate these guys while they're here. Regardless, he has perhaps one of the most iconic voices in hip-hop history, New York or otherwise. He broke out of the gate in the late 90s. He saved New York from going soft after Bad Boy, evil Bad Boy, almost monopolized New York hip-hop. He had energy, extreme passion, wore his heart on his sleeve in his music, and especially on his first two albums, he was extremely introspective and reflective. He showed his flaws as a person on the mic, and he wore it proudly. He knew he was a flawed, fucked up person, and he wasn't afraid to hide that. And there's not a lot of rappers that would do that. He was able to swallow his pride and give you who he was 100%. One of the realest rappers of all time. So he'd give you these sad, introspective songs, and then he'd turn around and drop an anthem like Party Up. I have a strong feeling that if DMX were still alive today, he might not be number 8 on this list. I think he'd make it into the top 20, where he falls on my personal list. Oh, Nicki Minaj at number 7. That's a stupid ass pick. We're gonna call her the most influential New York MC of all time over MC Lyte, over Roxanne Shante, who didn't even make this list, even over Lil' Kim or Foxy Brown. Sure, she sold a ton of records in the late 2000s, and for most of the 2010s, she changed the game. She was as influential as really probably any female rapper ever. But was any of the music good? No, not really. It was uninspired. It was poppy. Her voice was annoying. She didn't have that much to say on the mic. There are moments of empowerment in her music, which I appreciate, but overall, it's just like watered down pop rap. There's no way you can put her in the top 10 New York MCs of all time. This is a stupid record sales and influence-driven pick by Complex. That's what they do. They hit you with a string of excellent picks. I thought some of the picks between 10 and 20 were bangers. They started off the top 10 right with KRS-One, and then it's just been downhill from there. Nicki Minaj is not even close to the top 10 rappers out of New York. I don't think she even makes my top 50. 50 Cent at number 6, that's another joke. I'm not as mad at this one as I am as Nicki Minaj at number 7. 50 injected some intrigue back into New York hip-hop again when it was soft in the early 2000s. He and his G-Unit crew, of which I wasn't a huge fan, they did restore some street-level integrity to New York rap. It defined the mainstream era of East Coast hip-hop during that time, which was not a very good time for hip-hop. They kept it from being absolutely terrible, although they also contributed to the lack of quality and integrity a little bit. They sort of helped and hurt hip-hop, I believe. 50 has an iconic voice, but he's average as a rapper at best. He could get pretty versatile in his subject material. He was a decent writer. He would give you a song like Many Men, one of the deepest hip-hop songs of all time, one of the best piano beats in hip-hop history. I'm a real sucker for piano beats, so I love that song. Then he drops a love song like 21 Questions, and while I appreciate that versatility, that was kind of a pop song. So is In the Club. People glaze the hell out of Get Rich or Die Trying. I don't think that album is nearly as good as many people think. I just dropped a short for my favorite 2003 hip-hop albums. I did not include Get Rich or Die Trying, and I got a shit ton of hate. He was a star, I'll agree with that, but from a technical standpoint, from a skilled rapper standpoint, he's nowhere close to the top 10. He's in my top 50, get it? He is actually in my top 50 out of New York, but that's about it. We need to take the cultural influence seriously here. The record sales, not so much, but he did bring hip-hop to new corners of society, but no amount of records sold can justify a top 10 placement for such an average rapper. This is a trash pick. Second one in a row. Top 5 now. LL Cool J at number 5 is a pick that I'm kind of torn on. On one hand, he revolutionized the art of rapping in the mid-80s. I think as far as 80s rappers go, it was Reverend Run, it was LL Cool J, and then it was Rakim, the guys who really evolved hip-hop as the decade went on. He set the stage for the golden age explosion in the second half of the decade. He's more known for his work in the mid-school hip-hop, the mid-80s. So as quick as he came in and changed the game, he kind of went soft after that, with the exception of 1990s Mama Said Knock You Out. But everything else he did for the rest of the decade and into the 2000s, soft, weak pop. Yes, he came out with a furious new rhyme style. He did have, 4-3-2-1 in 1997, even though that album was really weak. He was able to tailor his voice to kind of trends as hip-hop continued to quickly evolve through the 90s into the 2000s. But that doesn't change the fact that he made watered-down music for most of his career. I'm going to go ahead and say, though, that his latest album, The Force, which dropped in 2024, is actually one of his most solid. You should go check it out if you haven't already. He gives us his first real hip-hop album in over 30 years, and it's really impressive for a guy guy in his mid-50s. I think top 5 is a stretch. I think top 15, top 20 would make more sense for me. That's 3 straight picks from Complex that I don't agree with as we get into very critical territory. But thank you. Number 4 is a redeeming pick. It's Rakim. He's in my top 3 New York rappers, well within my top 10 of all time. This is a good pick at number 4. It's an understandable, fair pick. While again, he's just a little bit higher for me, a spot or 2 higher. I like this. I talked about LL Cool J and Reverend Run pushing boundaries in the 80s. Rakim came in and really set the bar at a whole new level. He pushed boundaries more than any other rapper from a technical standpoint. The hip hop that you've been hearing since the late 80s, early 90s, all the way up to some of the underground stuff today, wouldn't sound like it did if Rakim hadn't done what he did. He essentially laid the groundwork for rapping as an intricate art. So many spitters that sound the way they do today or the way they did 10, 15, 20 years ago sound that way because of Rakim. He changed rhyme patterns. He really started doing new things with syncopation. He would kind of rhyme within his bars. He had a very unorthodox flow, kind of a start-stop flow at times. He did it all with a cool, calm, smooth demeanor which never ever compromised even an ounce of attitude. His work with Eric B in the late 80s and early 90s is nothing short of iconic, some of the better albums from the golden age. He had a great resurgence as a solo artist in the second half of the 90s after taking a couple years off. I think he's the best wordsmith of all time. He's one of the most technical early rappers to ever pick up a microphone. I love Rakim. He should be on everybody's top 5 New York rappers list, and Complex got this one right. Critical territory, yes, and they got this one right. Their number 3 pick is my number 1 of all time, and that's Nas. I already know who the 2 are ahead of him, and I don't agree with one of those 2. I'm a little irked by this. I'm a little bitter. I think Nas is the most influential rapper to ever come out of New York. I think he's the GOAT. While he gave us an absolute gift in 1994 with Illmatic, which just reached into the stratosphere unlike any hip-hop album ever had to that point, his career goes way beyond that. He has what I think is the most consistent career of any rapper ever, New York or otherwise. He came out in the early 90s, he did his thing, dropped Illmatic, dropped It Was Written, had a little bit of a faltering in the late 90s before dropping more great albums in the 2000s. 2012's Life Is Good, and then he comes back with 2 trilogies, King's Disease and Magic, in the 2020s, which were really, really good for a guy who was in his late 40s. Even a guy in his late 20s, those were very solid albums. And it's those 6 albums that came out in the first 3-4 years of the 2020s that really cemented him as the greatest of all time from New York for me. He started in the early 90s as this slick street kid who seemed to have the experience that people twice his age may or may not even have had. He perfected the art of street journalism, reporting on the conditions and the goings on the rough streets of Queensbridge, his neighborhood. He paved the way for another explosion of Queensbridge artists in the 90s, and through the years he's done a great job of evolving with the game. He's had mainstream success, he's had underground success with albums like The Lost Tapes, he's worked with so many different artists. He just made a guest appearance on the new Clips album, Let God Sort Him Out, here in July 2025. That's excellent. He's a successful businessman, one of the more successful businessmen in hip-hop history. He gets overshadowed by guys like 50 Cent and JayZ when it comes to being a businessman off the mic. I'm seeing him in a few days in Philadelphia perform Illmatic with an orchestra. I'm pumped. He's one of the most technically skilled rappers of all time. He's an undisputed legend. He's my number 1. I'm a little bitter to see him at number 3, knowing who's ahead of him. That said, I'm not mad at the Notorious B.I.G. at number 2. I do think Biggie's a tad bit overrated, but I can definitely understand this pick. Posthumous appeal, once again, Biggie's in my top 10 out of New York, no question about it. I do think this is a trendy, predictable pick by Complex. Back at the end of part 1, I predicted who the top 2 were going to be, and I was right. And that was before I even looked at the end of the list. Let's focus on Biggie as a rapper. He really revolutionized the way that hip-hop was delivered, the same way that Rakim and Nas did. He did it at the same time that Nas did it. Those 2 guys were really responsible for the emergence of New York hip-hop's renaissance. I did an entire video series on the Renaissance. Please go check that out. He had some of the most intricate and mind-blowing rhymes that hip-hop has ever seen. He did it in just such an iconic, gruff voice. He gave us some of the most daunting tales of a hustler. He was, of course, taken from us too early. His 2 albums are some of the most iconic pieces of music in hip-hop history. I think Ready to Die is one of the top street classics of all time. So even as a rapper with limited output, Biggie's still one of the most important names in hip-hop history, New York or otherwise. He backed it up with technical prowess like nobody else. I don't think he's number 2. I think he's top 10, but I understand this pick. Number 1, I don't necessarily agree with this, but again, it's kind of understandable, but it's also predictable. It's JayZ. It's Jigga Man himself. He is probably the most influential and successful New York rapper ever. His name is kind of synonymous with New York City. I think he's had very inconsistent output over the years. While he's had so many moments of greatness, his career's kind of been up and down. I'll give him props for Reasonable Doubt, which I think is one of the best debut albums in hip-hop history. I didn't really like The Blueprint. I thought Nas washed him in that beef, but you do have to acknowledge the greatness and influence of that album. I thought the Black Album was fantastic. Even in 2017, his comeback with 444, extremely impressive. However, overall, his stuff is a little bit too mainstream, a little bit too confident for me to consider him the best rapper out of New York ever. He was extremely versatile. He was able to successfully toe the line between mainstream and street level, which, as appealing as that sounds, it didn't really sit as well for me as it did for some. He was a very technically talented rapper. Let's be honest, he was one of the flashiest rappers of all time. He's kind of stepped a little bit away from hip-hop, although he still does show up here and there. I think of Jay Electronica's album from 2020. I thought his guest appearances on there were great. He's focused more on kind of being a record mogul, a businessman, and he's been very successful at it, and I give him a lot of props for that. But what does that mean as a rapper? Not really that much. He's also been associated with some shady names for quite a while now, so that hurts his stock a little bit in my book. But you cannot dispute his overarching influence on not just New York hip-hop, but hip-hop and music as a whole. Again, I think Complex has had a lot of influence-driven picks, and I think JayZ at number 1 is a prime example. We do have to take influence into account, but we're talking best rappers. They should have explained maybe a little bit more that it's not just about technique, and it is a little bit more about influence, but I think there's a number of names ahead of him when it comes to pure rapping talent, and there's many names ahead of him when it comes to discography. JayZ at number 1, it's predictable, it's perfectly on brand for Complex, and it is a perfectly understandable way to end this list, even if I don't completely agree with it. That's the list. That's it. I can think of about 50 other names out of New York that should be on this list but aren't. But how about you guys tell me which New York rappers you think got snubbed? Go check out my part 1 video first, though, just to get the full context of this list. How do you feel about Complex's picks as a whole? Let's hear what you think about the top 10. Let me know in the comments below. Anyway, thanks for checking this video out. As always, love you guys, love your support. Please do like and subscribe. It really helps me. I'm still a smaller creator. I'm growing. I'm doing it thanks to you guys. Thank you for all your love and support. I'm going to be doing Complex's top 50 Los Angeles rappers pretty soon. That's a list that just dropped within the past few weeks. I'm ready to get into that as well, so stay tuned.